So, welcome to LiberalViewer Sunday Live Clip Roundup. This is my live show I do every Sunday at 6:30 p.m. Pacific Time, where I take the clips that I find mostly on the Sunday morning talking head pundit shows here in the United States. That's mainly NBC's Meet the Press, ABC's This Week with George Stephanopoulos, CBS's Face the Nation, and Fox News Sunday, and I look at some other sources and some like quasi-news shows, and I find my favorite clips. I have about 20 clips today. The big topics for today on the Sunday morning shows were the unrest and the military coup in Egypt, the loss of President Morsi there, lost power to the military. I also wanted to talk somewhat about comprehensive immigration reform. That's moving to the House of Representatives now, and there was a lot of talk about that. So let me get to... I see I do have a bunch of people joining me now. I'm glad to see. Let me see if I have anyone saying they can see and hear me. Oh, I have a request to see Sandy tonight. I think if you hang out to the end, I'm going to let you see Sandy tonight. So, but I'm going to start with Egypt and then get to comprehensive immigration reform. And I'm glad that you can see and hear me. One of the most amusing clips I thought this morning came on Meet the Press. David Gregory is the host of Meet the Press. I got a lot of negative comments about David Gregory and his interaction with Glenn Greenwald a couple weeks back. I guess Egyptian diplomat Mohamed El-Haddad was reported to be taking over the interim prime ministership of Egypt, and he was going to appear on Meet the Press this morning and talk about it. And then at the last minute, they walked back the whole idea of him being the interim president, and he canceled his appearance on Meet the Press, which was explained by David Gregory in a somewhat amusing way, as you can see in this clip.
The big story of the weekend was that Mohamed El-Haddad was to be named the interim leader of the country. Then that was walked back, and just hours ago, Dr. El-Haddad canceled his appearance with me here on Meet the Press. I was able to reach him by phone. He said he had laryngitis and a fever. He was under doctor's orders not to do any television interviews, but there's indeed a lot of confusion about what's going on and whether the opposition to him being an interim leader was what was really at work here. He told me that he expects to be named as early as today firmly the leader of Egypt, but he also said, in his words, that the country is falling apart.
So it seems that Mohamed El-Haddad had a lot to say over the phone for someone who has laryngitis. I think people with laryngitis generally can't talk, so I guess David Gregory didn't really delve that deeply into the story of the laryngitis there, which seems to be something of a convenient cover story based on... And David Gregory goes back there later and talks about how some more things that Mohamed El-Haddad told him in this interview with laryngitis that he did but couldn't put on the air. So I thought that was kind of amusing, and somehow, I don't know. I mean, I guess maybe he really is sick, but it seems like a convenient coincidence. And then the next clip I wanted to show you here, let me do a little clicking, get everything ready here. The next clip I wanted to show you comes from Thomas Friedman. I also noticed he's somewhat controversial with my viewers. A lot of people don't seem to like Thomas Friedman, I think because he supported the Iraq War. And I certainly disagreed with him on that, but sometimes I think that he does some good analysis, and I wanted to show you a couple things he said about what's going on in Egypt. First, an early clip from same Meet the Press that you can see here.
The question is, and Ambassador Fahmy alluded to it, can you get a national unity government? If you look across all these Arab awakenings, there is one principle that has to be applied. No victor, no vanquished. Because anyone who thinks you can rule Egypt alone, or Syria alone, or Yemen alone, the lift in these countries, David, is so heavy. They are in such a deep hole that unless they can mobilize their populations together to lift them out of this hole, they're all heading for human development disasters.
And I think that's an important point there that Thomas Friedman made, that and that's one of the problems that the Muslim Brotherhood wasn't. It won the election, President Morsi won the election there, but he wasn't ruling as a unity government. He wasn't bringing in he was actually excluding a lot of people in the way that they were. He was governing, and I also wanted to let me see if I can get this up here real quick. There was a clip from let me see, Jeffrey Goldberg, who I think he just had he's from Bloomberg News, and he just had a clip on that same Meet the Press talking about the situation in Egypt. I'll talk about it after I show it in this.
The truth of the matter is that this was the events of last week are a victory for progressivism in a kind of way and a defeat for democracy.
Yeah, what do you mean by that? You wrote that in...
Well, I mean, look, obviously the Muslim Brotherhood is a totalitarian party, a fundamentalist party, anti-Semitic, anti-Christian, misogynistic party. Let's not kid ourselves about what they are. So their removal from power is a good thing for women in that country, for Christians, for other minorities, but it also reflects a defeat for democracy in the following sense. We know that this is not going to be the last time the military intervenes in this process. And if there had just been some level of patience on the part of liberals, the Muslim Brotherhood might have imploded on its own accord. Now they're put in a position to be martyrs and move more radically and truth of the matter is that this was
so yeah, I think that's an important point that he made there, that and I cut off the end, I'm sorry about that, but he's talking about how at the end there that the Muslim Brotherhood, if they can't they gain power by democratic means, and now they've been pushed out of power through undemocratic means, that they may actually turn to terrorism, and I mean, I think that really is a danger, and I had several other clips here. Let me load them up about what's going on in Egypt. I wanted to play for you. There was also a lot of talk about whether the Obama administration was involved enough, or whether they were over-involved, exactly what involvement the Obama administration had in the whole situation in Egypt. And I wanted to play like 3 clips in a row here, and I'm loading them up. Sorry for all the clicking here. Where's the last one? So first on the role that the Obama administration has played in this whole Egypt situation, I wanted to play something from Chuck Todd, also on that Meet the Press there, and I'm going to play 3 clips kind of in succession, but starting with this one from Chuck Todd, who I think Chuck Todd has some inside sources in the Obama administration, and so I think he's telling us what Obama administration insiders are saying here.
This administration, again, as it was a couple of years ago, seems like a bystander, not a real actor.
They do, but that is the one lesson they're going to take away from what went wrong in the transition from Mubarak to Morsi. You remember the United States, President Obama, very involved in pushing Mubarak out, and then hands off. Let Morsi go, not this time. This time, the plan is you will see the Obama administration, the Obama government, more involved in building the Democrat, because it goes to what Andrew's point is, and you've heard the president hint at this. Elections are not enough for a democracy. You've got to learn how to govern too. And that this time, the U.S. government is going to be more hands-on, helping them build all parts of this new government, both in the interim basis and in helping them hold this election, realizing the president owns this, whether he likes it or not, so there's no more sitting back.
U.S. officials.
So I guess I think that's the story that the Obama administration is trying to get out, that they were, hands off at some point, and they're going to be more hands on this time. And you can also hear that from this reporter from, I think he's from Reuters, David Rohde, who was over on Face the Nation. I wanted to play a clip of him kind of addressing the same issue here.
I think the administration could have a much clearer sort of just public position about, its goals in the region. That there's more options than simply we intervene militarily, we dictate events on the ground, we control everything, and doing absolutely nothing. And a real problem.
And how close do you think they are to absolutely nothing?
Well, this is an incredibly cautious White House, and one of the best things I've heard is that they're very good at making sort of clear decisions on clear issues. The really, really difficult decisions, they tend to split the difference. And you saw that a bit, you've seen that in Syria with arming the rebels, you see that a bit now in Egypt, where the president has a tough statement, and then, I don't know how this happened, but it was terrible optics. The next day, the president goes golfing, and Secretary Kerry's out on his yacht. What does that say to young people in Egypt, across the Middle East, whether part of the debate, about America's interest in the region and democracy? And there is a historic struggle in the region between conservative Islamists and secular liberals. We should be backing those secular liberals.
And Michael, to the point, the administration.
So you have both those journalists there, kind of, who have been talking to Obama administration insiders, hearing the Obama administration spin, and they're saying that the Obama administration has been kind of hands off, and they feel like they should actually be doing more. But I think it's true that publicly the Obama administration hasn't done a lot here because American involvement is not popular on the Arab or on the Egyptian street, and so I don't think that there's been a lot of public involvement from the Obama administration. But the fact that the military has taken the steps that it has, I think that the U.S. has a lot of influence over what the military does in Egypt. And a clip on that point I wanted to play from Dennis Kucinich on Fox News Sunday, and he said something I think you really have to keep in mind when thinking about the situation in Egypt and what America's involvement is in this clip.
Through 16 years in Congress, the only military which consistently visited my office, and I would say I didn't have a special privilege, or all over Capitol Hill, the Egyptian military. Now, why do they do that? Because the Egyptian military gets more than 70% of the U.S. of this budget comes from U.S. taxpayers. So we have an enormous influence on what the Egyptian military does. And to pretend that the White House is staying aloof from this doesn't pass the straight face test, frankly. So we have to understand that we are playing a role here, that there was a military coup, that the military is getting backed financially by the U.S., and unless, as Senator John McCain said, that we pull that aid, we will have been instrumental in helping not just this coup, but as Nina implies, perhaps the next one. We cannot tell Islamists that we want them to pursue democratic traditions if, in fact, when a democratically elected government who happens to believe in Islam is suddenly dislodged in a coup by a military which is strongly backed by the United States.
So, Juan, should we?
So I think that's also true, and or more true than what you heard from those journalists. What Dennis Kucinich said there about the Egyptian military being heavily influenced by the U.S. government and the funding that it gets from the U.S. government. And I think that gives the Obama administration a lot of leverage behind the scenes, which is actually, in this kind of situation, important because if the Obama administration was giving public endorsement to one side, that I think that would actually impact negatively on that side in the eyes of the people of Egypt, because the people of Egypt don't want American, the heavy hand of American imperialism or whatever, or however you want to put that. So I think that the Obama administration is wielding some behind-the-scenes influence through the Egyptian military. That's it. And of those clips, I would definitely agree with Dennis Kucinich there. I wanted to show you a couple other clips on Egypt before I switch over to comprehensive immigration reform. Let's see. There was another interesting let me just, the clicking you hear is I'm adding, I can only do 3 clips at a time on this software. And so I'm adding in a few more clips to show you here before, let's see, because I did those other ones a little bit out of order. Chuck Todd, so then I'll start those ones. So the first one I wanted to show you comes another one from Thomas Friedman back on Meet the Press, and he was talking about the problems of the Muslim Brotherhood. What they didn't. He talked before about how they really needed a unity government, and that Egypt, that pluralism, that there really is pluralism. How pluralism works in the United States, but isn't really working in Egypt or the Arab world. And I'll show you that clip here.
Pick up a point Jeff said. One of the problems in all these countries, they are pluralistic, but they have no pluralism. We forget what freaks we are. We just re-elected a black man whose middle name is Hussein, whose grandfather was a Muslim who defeated a woman to run against a Mormon. No one does that. We are freaks. And the only way these countries are going to be able to govern horizontally. For all these years, they've been governed, vertically, from the top down by iron fists. The Ottomans are gone. The colonial powers are gone. Now the iron-fisted generals are gone. The only way they can be governed is now horizontally. Can they write a social contract for how they live together with their pluralism? That's what's at stake here. I don't know if it can happen.
Can we talk a little bit?
So that's, I think that's true that pluralism has to be accepted in, or there has to be a government that is a pluralistic government that doesn't exclude people. And I think that's, even though this is a coup, and I'll get to the whole coup question in a minute, the people who were deposed weren't really liberal Democrats. I talked about that a little bit back in my live event, LiberalViewer First Wednesday on Wednesday there, that part of the problem here was that even though this is definitely a coup, in my opinion, I mean, not to call it a coup is kind of silly, but the people who were deposed weren't liberal Democrats. They were democratically elected, but there were definitely some problems. And I wanted to show this second clip here from Jeffrey Goldberg talking about that here.
The Muslim Brotherhood's big chance. They've been waiting 80 years to take over Egypt, and they blew it. They put a bumpkin in charge, a guy who was in over his head, who, while over his head, tried to seize pretty much absolute power. We talked about a coup last week. There was a coup in last November, when basically Morsi tried to put himself beyond judicial review and tried to take over absolute rule. And that's when things turned south for him. So they have blown it, and Tom is exactly right. They have not shown themselves to be ready to be the leaders of a pluralistic society.
Let me turn to...
And I think that's true, that there are two sides to this coup. I mean, it's a coup, but it's a coup against people who had lost the support of the people by embracing undemocratic or illiberal values. And, that was one of the... Over on This Week with George Stephanopoulos, although Jonathan Karl was subbing in this week for George Stephanopoulos, there was a lot of talk about whether what happened was a coup or was not a coup. And I don't know, it's kind of it seems like a semantic argument, but it also determines if the U.S. government calls it a coup, then they cut off the $1.5 billion of aid to Egypt that they're sort of required by treaty to under like the Camp David Accords, and but if they call it a coup, then there's no more aid. And so first, here's what the I think his name is Gehad. Let me see. If I can get his name right, Gehad El-Haddad, who's the spokesman for the Muslim Brotherhood in Egypt. He first talked about whether it was a coup on This Week with George Stephanopoulos, actually talking to Jonathan Karl in this clip.
It was not a coup. Well, I don't understand what naivety can behold any person to see all the ingredients political science-wise of a coup and not see it's a coup. It's military junta on TV, tanks on the street, troops on protests, military people shooting civilians. I mean, it's every ingredient of a full police state. I mean, what else are people waiting for?
The leadership.
So, I mean, at least I don't agree with the Muslim Brotherhood on a lot of things there. But I think I do have to agree on whether this was a coup. I mean, it definitely was a coup. But then there were also a couple interesting clips from Mohamed Tawfik, who is the Egyptian ambassador to the United States. He's in kind of a weird position. He was appointed by the Morsi government, the Muslim Brotherhood government, but he's still the ambassador, and he's kind of, I guess he worked out his own deal with the military. And so in a couple different clips on that same show, he tried to talk about he tried to explain why what happened wasn't really a coup. Here's his first one here.
To say that what has happened is not a coup. What is your response?
What has happened is that the people of Egypt have decided that President Morsi did not act during his year in office as president for all Egyptians. 22 million Egyptians wrote petitions demanding early elections. My advice to the Muslim Brotherhood is they need to acknowledge the mistakes that they made, and they need to join the process. Let us look ahead to the future. There is room for everyone in Egypt, but there is no room for violence. There is no room for incitement to hatred and incitement to commit acts of violence.
But you just...
Okay, so that's kind of a weird way to get around the whole coup thing by saying that it was a popularly supported coup, so it wasn't really a coup, and I don't completely buy that. And then he kind of continued a little bit later in the program in this clip.
This is not a coup.
Absolutely not. The military, listen, what happened was you had over 15 million people in the street, and President Morsi, he could have said, listen, my people, I listen, I hear you. But instead of that, he whipped up religious fervor among his supporters. And there was violence in the air. After more than 20 people had been killed, leaders from Egyptian parties, from Egyptian religious establishments, from the military, they came together. They said, we have to stop this. Otherwise, violence will spiral out of control.
But now...
So I think that is kind of the best way to try to call this not a coup. And I mean, there is some truth to what he's saying there, that there was popular support, and that Morsi had the chance to respond to the millions of people who were asking for early elections. He could have reached out and done what I was showing in those earlier clips, done like a unity government, or gone for real pluralism. But he did his own kind of coup back in November. So I don't really like this coup, but I don't really like the Muslim Brotherhood arrangement either. And I think there were the two bad choices there. I think George Will on This Week with George Stephanopoulos put it kind of in a pithy way in this clip.
It's hard to rejoice in the overthrow of democratic forms, although it's hard not to rejoice in the overthrow of a Muslim Islamist government that threatened to screw down an anti-modern tyranny that would be difficult to reverse. That said, when this began in Tahrir Square against Mubarak, the unrest in Egypt, there was much talk about all the young people with their smartphones accessing the social media, missing the fact that half of Egyptians live on less than $2 a day. Smartphones are not the symbol. That is the symbol of Egypt. Now, Egypt's choice today is between two flavors of tyranny. One is tyranny fueled by religious extremism, and the other is tyranny leavened by corruption. That would be the tyranny of the army, and that's probably what they'll get. Well, it's hard to rejoice.
And I think that's definitely true there, and that there are two kind of difficult choices, and Egypt doesn't really have the institutions for a liberal democracy. They can have one vote and put someone in power, but they have to build up those traditions and those institutions, and maybe this restart that will happen, but I'm kind of pessimistic on that. I saw something that made me optimistic, but I'm going to come back to that at the end because it's not really from the pundit shows. It's this, I don't know if any of you saw this 12-year-old boy on the streets of Egypt talking about the political situation. I saw it got a lot of play on Reddit recently. I saw it this morning on Facebook, and I'm going to play that at the end. But I wanted to do a few clips on the comprehensive immigration reform issue, which was the other big issue that was discussed on a lot of the programs. And I wanted to start with a clip from first a Republican representative, and then here, I'm sorry for the clicking, I gotta add all this stuff in here. Last week I showed you this clip from Chuck Schumer saying why he thought that the House was eventually gonna get rid of the Hastert rule and let which says that they will only bring bills up for a vote if a majority of the majority, which means a majority of Republicans, support it. And if they get rid of that rule, then comprehensive immigration reform can pass the House with some Republican votes and then a lot of Democratic votes, the bill from the Senate. First I want to show you a clip from Representative Mike McCaul on a different way that immigration reform is actually going to go through the House of Representatives, according to him, and I think he was the spokesman that the Republicans sent out there. They're going to take it piece by piece in kind of a piecemeal way, what's called regular order in the House, and pass each piece and go slowly, as he described on Face the Nation in this clip.
They don't want comprehensive. What they want is regular order pieces of legislation, and eventually this will put the House and Senate in a conference committee position.
Sometime next year.
Well, it could be as early as late this year, maybe early next year, where we do hash out the differences between the Senate and the House versions. But again, I would argue that what our bill calls for is a plan and a strategy which we haven't had for a decade. It calls for metrics to measure success, and it defines operational control. These are all key ingredients because we haven't had that before. In the past, all we've done is thrown money down at the problem on an ad hoc basis, and it hasn't worked. And what the Senate just passed was, again, a bunch of candy thrown down there, a bunch of assets thrown down there to gain votes, but without a methodical, smart border approach. We want a smart border. We also want a smart immigration plan.
Did he just call the Senate immigration bill a bunch of candy assets? I think he did. He just called them a bunch of candy assets. Well, that's why I played that clip. But also, he's kind of saying there that he thinks that comprehensive immigration reform is slowly going to make its way through the House piece by piece, and then sometime late this year, maybe early next year, we'll actually see something. But I think there is the reason that John Boehner may not bring it up for that, give up the Hastert rule and bring it up for a vote of the whole House, and we'll let the majority of the majority decide rather than the majority of the House decide, is because they think that the real problem is that they're not going to be far right enough to keep the House from challenges from the right. And Amy Walter, who's a political analyst, was also on Face the Nation, and she explained that in this clip.
Well, where they start is a very different place from where the Senate starts and for where the National Party starts. The National Party and a lot of folks in the Senate are worried about 2016 and the Electoral College math. We heard a lot about that in the conversations you had today about winning Latino voters and being able to win national elections. If you're a House member, you're worried about 2014. And the reality for these members of Congress who are Republicans is that 2014 election is not dictated or determined or affected very much at all by Latino vote. Most of these members sit in very, very safe districts. And when you look at the most recent redistricting, what you come up with is an average Republican district that is 75% white. So increasing the vote of Latinos, increasing the percentage of the vote that Republicans get from Latinos isn't going to affect them. What they're more worried about, of course, is if they vote for a bill that's going to get them a challenge from the right. That's their bigger concern.
And is it?
And I think that's true, and I'm starting to think that maybe Chuck Schumer was wrong when in that clip I showed last Sunday, that they're eventually going to say that there's too much pressure from Latinos in 2016. We want to let the Democrats pass this without a majority of Republican support. And I think Cokie Roberts on This Week with George Stephanopoulos had sort of a similar appraisal of what John Boehner was going to do, or his analysis, how he was going to approach this in the House in this clip.
It's hard to imagine that being on that list.
And his argument would be, look, my main job is to hold on to the House of Representatives. And the Republican establishment, whatever that is, does certainly want to hold on to the House of Representatives. Without it, they would be powerless in Washington right now. And so if Boehner's calculation is that the only way that you can do that is to sink this bill if it has legalization in it, then that's what's going to happen.
But they're getting pressure.
And I think that's definitely true, that that more true than what Chuck Schumer said last week, that the Republicans in the House care a lot more about 2014 and keeping the House than they do about how the presidential candidate from the Republicans in 2016 is going to do in more years than that. That's like an eternity in political terms. And let me get, I had a couple more clips on immigration I wanted to show you here. I'm sorry. It's going to take me a second to load them up here. I got to delete the ones I had. And then there was an interesting clip from, an argument between conservative columnist David Brooks and conservative congressional representative Raul Labrador, who were both talking about immigration reform, and they went back and forth. I took a couple, this was on Meet the Press, and in sort of the discussion area, and I took a couple clips there. There are a couple more clips, and if you look below me here in the video description, you can see links to longer clips of everything I'm going to show, which are definitely worth watching. And first, let me show you kind of how David Brooks, let me get my earplug here, how David Brooks said that there was no logical conservative argument against comprehensive immigration reform in this clip.
Intellectually weak cases in this town. I rarely seen as intellectually weak case is the case against the Senate immigration bill. The Republicans say they want to reduce illegal immigration. The Congressional Budget Office says the Senate bill will reduce it by 1/3 to 1/2. They say they want economic growth. All the top conservative economists say it'll produce economic growth. They say they want to reduce the debt. CBO says it will reduce the debt. All the big major objectives the Republicans stand for, the Senate immigration bill will do. And so the other things they're talking about are secondary and tertiary issues, whether we get 86% border protection or 90%. Compared to the big things this bill does, they're minuscule, mystified by what they...
Congressman...
And, you know, he was saying that there was no logic to the Republicans' argument right in front of, like, this Republican congressman, and they were going back and forth. There was actually something before that, and then this is what the Republican congressman from Idaho, who Raul Labrador said here.
I'm sorry, but what I just heard was totally ridiculous. If you listen to what the CBO said, they said that it's going to be between 1/3 and 50% reduction in illegal immigration. That means that every 5 years we're going to have to do another Reagan amnesty. What the American people want is a secure border. They understand that there is going to be economic growth, and I agree that there's going to be economic growth when you have immigration reform. That's why I'm a big proponent of immigration reform. But for somebody to sit here on national TV and say that it is actually a weak argument for us to argue that we want something like 90% security, I think it's actually beyond the pale. What we need to do, look at just one thing. There's two components of the law that we need to change. For example, the ICE agents have told us that if they could work with the local communities, with the local law enforcement agents, they would be much more effective in securing our interior. The Democrats do not want any local enforcement of immigration laws. We do it with drug laws. We do it with all these other things that where we have these task forces between the federal and state and local agencies. And the Democrats do not want to do it with immigration. We could do that, and we could curtail a lot of the illegal immigration. There's a lot of other things that we can do to make this law stronger.
I did not like that comment at all, because, you know, that last thing about local law enforcement enforcing immigration law, I made a couple of videos about that, and one that includes my dog Sandy, about this whether a woman should be deported for her dog's barking, and that was about how here in California we try to stop local law enforcement from enforcing federal immigration law, because what happens is that people, you know, the millions of undocumented immigrants here are become too afraid to talk to local law enforcement, and that means when they're victims of crimes or even witnesses to crimes, they won't come forward, and that makes all of us less safe, because the police can't investigate crimes when there's a large segment of the population who won't talk to them because they're afraid of being deported because of what that congressman was saying right there. In fact, there's a law that we're trying to pass here in California called a state law called the Trust Act, that says that local law enforcement can't enforce federal immigration laws or send people for possible deportation unless they have serious crimes on their records, and I really support that. So that's why I wanted to show that clip. I have a couple quick more clips that I wanted to show you on the Egypt thing before I'm going to see if there's any good discussion questions going on in my from the people who are watching the show live here, if we can get a little live discussion going. There's this great video I saw that has oh, sorry, I'm gonna have to do wait, hold on here. Have to do a quick little Marco Rubio here, and excuse me. I saw this video about this 12-year-old on the streets of Egypt who was interviewed about the situation, and he seemed to explain it a lot better than some of the problems and some of the intricacies of Egyptian politics, a lot better than I saw from some of those paid political pundits that I showed you earlier. And I wanted to show a couple. Again, if you look below me in the video description, you can see the whole like 2.5-minute video of this 12-year-old boy. But first, I wanted to show you. He talked about what a fascist theocracy is in this first clip here.
ما خرجناش من دولة عسكرية عشان نخرج لفاشية دينية. يعني فاشية دينية ده أنا ما أعرفش يعني إيه فاشية أصلا. يعني إن فاشية دينية هي إن أنت تستخدم الدين اللي أنت عايزه وتتشدد في الدين وتعمل حاجات باسم الدين والدين ما بيتاخدش كل دولة.
So it's good to see a 12-year-old boy. I'm sorry, I forgot to say you have to read the subtitles there, but I think it's good to see a 12-year-old boy in Egypt knows what a fascist theocracy is. And he also talked about how a specific part of the Egyptian constitution that and how it affected women's rights to put Islam into the Egyptian constitution, and again you can have to read the subtitles, but I thought it was a really interesting clip you can see here.
بيقولك ان الست زي الرجل في كل حاجة فيما لا يخالف احكام الشريعة الاسلامية. طب في حاجة احكام الشريعة الاسلامية بجوز ان الراجل يأدب مراته ودوت ما يجوزش في المجتمع. ليه المشكلة يعني؟ لا ما ينفعش، يعني انا ما اجيش اقرب مراتي اسحلها وتبقى على وشك الموت وتقول لي ده تأديب، ده مش تأديب، ده تعرض واستعباط.
So I'm glad to see that a 12-year-old boy in Egypt understands the problems with putting Islam into the Egyptian constitution, especially for women in Egypt. And I think that kind of epitomizes some of the problems with the democratically elected Egyptian government, the Muslim Brotherhood, and some of the things they did to lose the support of the people and to lose their democratic legitimacy. Not that the military coup has democratic legitimacy, but I don't know if it's going to be a step to some future government with democratic legitimacy. I mean, I don't know. But I also, well, before I get to the discussion, I saw an interesting, I think Christiane Amanpour mentioned this, and then I searched it back. This is the earliest I could find. Here's a tweet from the BBC correspondent in Egypt about a joke that is currently popular on the streets of Egypt. Egyptian opposition joke: the Muslim Brotherhood is like the measles. Get it once and then you're immune. So I don't know if that's going to be the experience of Egypt, and if that's kind of flip. And I don't know whether the Muslim Brotherhood is now going to be disconnected from the political process and become a terrorist organization in Egypt because it was overthrown by a military coup, and that could be a really bad situation. Or I don't know how it's going to turn out, so I guess it's not really that funny. But let me look in the comment section here of my video and see if I have a couple comments I can respond to before I sign off here. I'm having problems getting all the comments to load up here. I don't know what the deal is, but video manager, maybe that'll work. Live events. I can't even see the comments. Well, oh wait, here. I do it. I do have a couple comments here. John Klein said, I hope you're going to show that clip of the Egyptian kid that you linked earlier today. That was awesome. People could learn from that young man. Yes, I did show that clip. 2-bit viewer says, I bet money Syria is on its way to partition, but I'd also bet Egypt wants to be whole. Well, you know, one of the things I said last Wednesday is I think that the fact that the U.S., that Egypt was an ally of the U.S. since the Camp David Accords and that whole situation where Egypt supposedly kicked out the Soviet advisors. There's some controversy about that, but that Egypt moved from being a client of the Soviet Union to being a client of the United States after the Camp David Accords is why the transition to democracy is more stable in Egypt than it is in Syria, where Syria remained a client of the Soviet Union and is now a big ally of Russia. And so without the American influence, there is a lot less stability. And NO8549 says, I'd be surprised if Friedman says anything insightful. Yeah, I know a lot of people have that kind of attitude toward Thomas Friedman, although the world is flat thing, I think he does have some insights. I don't know. Well, you have to let me know if you thought any of that was insightful. So I guess I'm kind of at over 45 minutes, or about 45 minutes now, so I should probably finish up. I hope you enjoyed the clips I showed. Now, I did say that I would show Sandy, and I don't know, everything here is kind of, let's see if I can do it without messing everything up or making a big, it looks like Sandy's kind of sleeping here, but before I sign off, you can see my EFF t-shirt. Before I show you Sandy, let's see if I can, Sandy, come here. Ah! Sorry about that noise. Sandy, can you see Sandy? See, Sandy, come here. There, you get to see Sandy, and I hope you enjoyed LiberalViewer Sunday live clip roundup, and you're kind of seeing Sandy from below there. That's kind of bizarre. And I'm going to try to get my edited, produced video, Impeach Obama for NSA spying, should be up within 24 hours. It's been kind of delayed. I apologize for that, but I hope you enjoyed the clips I showed you today, and there goes Sandy. And see you around the internet. Have a good rest of your weekend, and thanks for watching. Sandy.